Good afternoon, Jordan. Thank you for being with us. First of all, for the record, please state your name, what is your current profession, and where did you study at university?
My name is Jordan Woodley. I'm a professional actor, radio presenter and producer, and I studied drama and theatre at the University of South Wales.
During your degree, did you receive any funding towards your education?
I received the Student Finance England loan and grants. I received a disability student allowance.
What are your career ambitions in the long term, so in the next few years' time?
Well, I intend to pursue my acting career to try and get into further stage and screen performance, but I'm also interested in going into radio drama, looking at writing, producing and directing.
As you're aware, there is going to be an EU referendum that is going to take place on the 23rd of June. As you know, this is going to affect the lives of the British people, especially for the young people. Are you following at all any of the recent debates on the news?
Yeah, I heavily follow the EU referendum debate. I think it's actually one of the most important political movements of at least the past 5 or 10 years. I think it's, I've tried to follow it as much as I can as a layman, but I've tried to keep my, my perspective on it.
In the UK, there are 10 million disabled people. There are about 7 million who are at the working age and about 5 million who are over the state pension age. Thanks to the European social funding, last year there were about 87,000 people who managed to receive jobs thanks to that.
I think a significant amount of funding and support that disabled people receive from the UK government is definitely supported by the funding we receive from the European Union. Unfortunately, personally, I couldn't trace back any support I get. I off the top of my head, I don't know which aspects of support I receive are directly related to the EU's policies, but I definitely believe that a proportion of it is definitely, a large proportion of it is definitely European Union guided.
Also in UK universities, especially in Cardiff, students with disabilities are able to receive grants through the EU funding towards their education as being part or being protected by the European human rights law, which protects the disabled people. Do you think the EU has contributed a lot towards people with disabilities in this country?
I think a significant amount of funding and support that disabled people receive from the UK government is definitely supported by the funding we receive from the European Union. Unfortunately, personally, I couldn't trace back any support I get. I off the top of my head, I don't know which aspects of support I receive are directly related to the EU's policies, but I definitely believe that a proportion of it is definitely, a large proportion of it is definitely European Union guided.
Do you think without the EU, the British government can support them financially?
I think it's going to suffer significantly. I think, that as a disabled person, I mean, there are already issues regarding the nature of funding for disabled people, the weights given to disabled people, and I think that's only going to suffer more as inevitably there will be. I personally believe that the separation from the EU will cause a financial backlash for the UK government, regardless of whether it's short or long term, and I think that will definitely affect something like support for disabled people.
One of the main disabilities in this country is the loss of sight, and according to the statistics here from the RNIB site's Lost UK report back in 2012, it states there are 1.8 million people in the UK who suffer from eye loss. And by the time it will be 2020, the number of those people will reach up to 2.2 million. And also, by the time it will be 2050, that number will likely double to around 4 million people. Do you think, with the resources provided by the EU to the UK, such as research, medicine, the number of doctors who've been trained to help these people, do you think it is enough to support them, or do you disagree?
Well, as a person with severe eye loss myself, it's an interesting topic, really. Because I went to, during my secondary school up to GCSE, I went to a visually impaired school, and I think that unfortunately that is a shocking statistic, the fact that it's going to rise in that way, and I am aware that the degrees of sight loss vary, from people who say without support of, without visual aids like glasses and whatnot, is increasing. I'm hoping that the more severe to the level that my sight loss is hopefully not increasing. But I really I believe that that the Europe does have good medical research facilities, and I feel that regardless of whether we were united with the European Union or not, hopefully those sorts of bonds would maintain, because I think these sorts of levels of research, just on the research level, are important, are crucial, because yes, it is something that needs to pursue, because yes, likelihood is more people will lose sight to some degree, increasing numbers, and I think that this has to be one of the key, especially considering we are in a very visual world, that this is something that we really need to make sure that we can really research into treatments, support, ways to tackle such things. In terms of medicine, unfortunately, that will be something I think will suffer because of the breaks away from the EU, because again, that we will have separate policies, we will have a separate attitude towards our medical facilities than Europe, and that that may be a good thing, that may be a bad thing. It's those sorts of things you can never judge, but I feel that unification in medical practices is something I've always supported, regardless of whether it's Europe or America or Asia. The closer we can stay to strong sort of shared medical research, the better it is, globally.
Okay, now I want to move on to the arts, but my next question is relevant still to disabilities. In Cardiff, there are theatre companies like the Hijinks theatre company that specialise in helping people with Down syndrome, autism, and other forms of disabilities. There's also the Cymru Theatre, who do a similar thing as well. There's Chapter, the Welsh Millennium Centre, and of course not forgetting the National Theatre for Wales community, who all have worked hard to work with people with disabilities, and they're doing a fantastic job in changing these people's lives and giving them creative opportunities to find work in the industry. And also not forgetting, thanks to the funding provided by the National Assembly and the EU, who have provided the funding to these companies for them to continue their work. But let's just say, if Brexit, the Leave the EU campaign, win the vote, and most likely the EU funding will gradually stop, could it have a terrible impact on those companies, or do you think they will manage to survive financially?
I think Wales is very interesting. Wales is a very interesting discussion point when it comes to funding, because I do feel like the Welsh government does have a good internal funding policy. And yes, of course, it will suffer. The UK nationally will suffer in terms of funding because, again, when Europe removes funding, everywhere will, nationally, everywhere will feel that sense of loss. But to the credit of Wales, I do feel like, that they very much have strong investment in, especially in the arts as well. And it's one of those double-edged swords kind of situations where we'll suffer, but I do feel like that. I feel like the companies will persist, and Wales will support it, and so it's very much a seeing how things continue after the dust has settled.
The Welsh Millennium Centre is one of the main art institutions here in Cardiff, and as you know, it has provided a lot of jobs for people. It has provided a lot of creative opportunities for young emerging artists, as yourself for that matter, and it also promotes, most importantly, equality for everyone, regardless of their race, nationality, or gender for that matter. However, if we do end up leaving the EU, are you afraid that without being protected by the European human rights to protect these ethnic groups in this country, will there be limited opportunities for them, or do you disagree with my statement?
I feel, and maybe I'm being optimistic, but I feel, especially with the Welsh Millennium Centre, who I've done several projects I've been involved with have been supported by the Welsh Millennium Centre. I feel as though, if I'm being optimistic about it, that the equality will remain. It's hard to, it's one of those things. It's hard to, you don't want to make a judgment call, but I feel as though, yes, I would say they will try their hardest to maintain a sense of equality for employment, regardless of age, gender, and race.
So, with the referendum just 2 months away, are you personally voting?
Oh yes, I've actually registered to vote specifically.
Do you strongly encourage other young voters, not just in Cardiff, but throughout the UK, to vote in this referendum?
100%. I feel that regardless of how the vote goes, we need to encourage people to vote. The more that young people vote, it is our future, and regardless of whether the vote turned out that to leave or to stay, at least it would be more of a unified voice, representative of how young people feel, rather than what could be a case of a minority of very people with very strong opinions voting one way or the other, but the rest of us, unfortunately, just because people chose not to vote, being a victim of huge political change.
And my final question is, do you have a message to the other voters here in Cardiff?
I strongly have feelings about the European Union and the fact that it shocks me, and I'm quite concerned about leaving. I strongly feel that, but everything has its either side, and I feel that regardless of how much impact you put into it as a young person, if you just read the odd article, or just get some idea, at least that will be something, rather than doing nothing, taking no part in it, and just being a product of whatever comes. I mean, I would never sway people one way or another. I strongly feel that everyone has that right to an individual decision, and so as strongly as I feel about staying, I feel that people should vote with their with their personal feelings in mind. But please be informed. Please, at least you don't have to follow every debate or every report. Be released, but at least look at Europe and look how leaving Europe could personally affect you, or staying in Europe could, either way. But, at least go in, please, register to vote, and try to get as informed as you feel you need to, and make a decision.
Thank you very much, Jordan, for your time.
Thank you.